Welcome everybody to the afternoon session of the Lane County Board of Commissioners for October 20th, 2020. We're going to start in with a public hearing. So we're on agenda item 11A, public hearing order 20-10-20-07 in the matter of legalizing a portion of Gillum Road located in Section 8, Township 17 South, Range 3 west of the Willamette Meridian with a public hearing. So this is a public hearing on the matter, giving an opportunity for those present to provide public testimony to be considered by the board. If the board approves the proposal, they can adopt a final order on the legalization, which will make the subject portion of Gillum Road a county road. At this point, I'm going to call for a disclosure of board member ex parte contacts and for abstentions due to any conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, or biases. Any conflicts?
I have none.
Chair Buck, I will recognize that I regularly attend Northeast Neighbors meetings, which takes place at a church, typically right on this section of the road, but I see no actual conflict of interest.
Okay. If there are no other disclosures from the board, we will open the public hearing. And at that, so we're opening the public hearing and we're going to hear a report by staff next. So with us should be Mr. Blume.
Thank you, Chair Buck. Good afternoon, Commissioners. We're here today to ask the board to consider the legalization of a portion of Gillum Road and to hear public feedback from any interested party for the board to consider prior to approving or denying this request. If the board approves this action, the subject portion of Gillum Road will be brought into the county road system. The portion of Gillum Road being considered for legalization today is located north of the Ayers Road intersection in North Eugene and is approximately 1/2 mile in length, and is the portion that is currently being maintained by county road maintenance crews. It was recently discovered that the road is not a county road while staff was performing preliminary surveying activities in support for a safety project that is being planned along the road. When a road is established as a county road, a road record that we refer to as a master road file is created and added to the records that are maintained by the county surveyor's office. The master road file contains a record of all the proceedings that were acted upon by either the county court or the Board of County Commissioners, and includes documents such as legal descriptions and road surveys. Theoretically, our office should have a master road file for every county road that has been established in Lane County dating into the late 1800s. It was while researching the subject right away in support of the safety project when we discovered that a master road file does not exist for this section of Gillum Road. To complicate matters, additional right-of-way dedications acquired to widen the road that have been accepted by past boards are defective, some of which were correctly accepted as local access roads, while others have been incorrectly accepted for various non-contiguous county roads. Legalizing the road will supersede the past defective acceptances and help my efforts to correct the road record. As previously mentioned, for many years, the road has been maintained by Lane County road maintenance crews. During our research, we discovered that the status of the road came into question in 1989 when Public Works staff asked the surveyor's office to research the road for the purpose of determining the location of the end of county road. Our office has located a file documenting the findings of that request. The research file indicates that Public Works staff was notified at that time that the road was not a county road. A handwritten note in the file indicates that Public Works staff replied to the news that maintenance of the road would surely continue. ORS Chapter 368 does not allow road fund dollars to be expended on non-county roads unless the governing body approves expenditure under certain circumstances. Legalizing the road will bring the road fund expenditure along Gillum Road into compliance with the statute. In 2018, Lane County was awarded grant funding through the Central Lane Metropolitan Planning Organization to aid in development and implementation of safety improvements on Gillum Road between Ayers Road and Sterling Park Place. The project has two distinct segments. The first, between Ayers Road and Ashbury Drive, will be built to match existing sidewalks, curbs, and gutters along both sides of Gillum Road. The second segment, between Ashbury Road and Sterling Park Place, will install sidewalks along the west side of Gillum Road. Conceptual designs were completed in February 2020 and presented to the community during an open house held at Gillum Elementary School on March 11, 2020. Approximately 15 people attended the open house. County staff was on hand during the open house to answer questions. An additional presentation scheduled at a later date was canceled due to concerns related to coronavirus. Attendees were generally supportive of the designs. The largest point of contention centered on the endpoint of the project, Sterling Park Drive, instead of the northern terminus of the road at Muir Pond Way. This was explained as being related to tree and property impacts. The Oregon Department of Transportation has oversight authority for the project because the project is funded with federal dollars. ODOT has indicated to county staff that funding for this project is in jeopardy unless Gillum Road is established as a county road. The surveyor's office has provided public notice of this meeting using three methods: posting, mailings, and publication. The public notice included information such as the purpose, time and date, information on how to participate in this meeting via webinar, and my contact information. To date, I've received a handful of phone calls regarding today's proceedings. The questions asked were related to the legalization process and potential impacts to personal property rights, or questions related to the safety project. None of the aforementioned phone conversations resulted in objections to the legalization process, but rather in support of it. I have received one email in objection that I will read now for the record. This email I received on October 5th, 2020, and it was from John and Maureen Statler that live at 4075 Gillum Road. It is unfortunate that we must come out in opposition to this project. We appreciate the work that has been done and recognize the need for sidewalks on Gillum Road. Our opposition rests with the simple fact that Gillum Road does not end at the point indicated on the project map. Gillum Road extends past three additional city streets: Creekside Way, Muir Pond Way, and the most recent addition, Clear Brook Drive. This unrecognized section of Gillum is in constant disrepair and has flooding issues, yet supports traffic from the aforementioned city streets. Occasionally, when the potholes reach epic proportions, the county will come out and fill them, and that is appreciated, but unfortunately, it only lasts a short time. We understand funds are short and that the proposed project is all that can be funded at this time, but the whole of Gillum Road needs to be recognized to gain our support. Thank you. In summary, the public benefit of approving these proceedings will accomplish three things. The road will be brought into the county road system, bringing maintenance activities into compliance with ORS Chapter 368 requirements that limit road fund expenditures to county roads. Legalizing a road will correct the missing and defective road records along this section of Gillum Road. And finally, legalizing the road will allow an important safety project to move forward without risk of losing grant money that has been awarded to Lane County. This concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. We'll move into public testimony and back for any further discussion. So at this point, I'm going to ask our moderator if we have anybody that we see that would like to give public testimony. Depending on how many people. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I interrupted.
I was just saying, depending on how many people you see, normally we give, about up to 5 minutes or so per person.
I have 2 people signed up, it looks like, and if the 2 people who have signed up would raise their virtual hand to let me know if they would like to give public comment. Chair Buck, I do not see any hands raising. I'm not sure if this is, oh, I see one. Would you like me to begin the public testimony now and make it 5 minutes?
Yes, please.
Okay. I see Teresa Woolsey has raised her hand for public comment. Teresa, I will unmute you and you may begin your public comment. Teresa, you are self-muted.
Okay.
There you go. You may
Can you
begin
hear
your
me?
public comment. Yes.
Okay, great. I know that one of the comments was that people have concerns about our property. And we do have concerns about our property as well as our neighbors do. And so those are some questions that we have. And I know that they have talked about they would send some people out to discuss if they needed to purchase our property from us. We have more concerns about our shrubbery that is close to the road as well as our fence. At what point is someone going to come out and speak to us about whether that is going to be impacted? Who is going to help us with that? Are those going to be moved back? Is the retaining wall going to be impacted with that? At what point is someone going to come and ease our mind on those issues? Those are my only questions.
Okay, thank you for your public comment.
Can I
see
respond?
one?
I'm sorry. Did you want me to respond to that at this time, or should we wait till the end?
Let's wait till the end of public comment, then we'll have you respond.
Thank you.
I do see one other person is on the line, but I do not see a hand raised. So if you would like to give public comment, please raise your hand. Chair Buck, I think that is the end of public comment for this item.
Okay, Mr. Blume, if you would like to have a staff response, and then we'll go into discussion deliberation by the board. Commissioner Farr, do you need to say something before that occurs?
No, following Mr. Blume. Thank you, Chair Buck.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Buck. What I can say about when staff would be available to go out and actually look at the actual impacts that the improvement safety project will be, you know, that's a little bit farther down the line. Right now, as far as what I understand, that project is in a conceptual phase. And at a certain point in time, when our engineers decide that additional acquisitions need to be made along those project limits, we would have staff that would go out there and meet with the landowners, show them the impacts to their property, and then we would negotiate in good faith to purchase that property if it's needed. I do want to make it very clear that the legalization process that we are going through today only affects existing right-of-way. And so only dedicated right-of-way is impacted. There is no impact to private property rights.
Okay, thank you. We'll go into discussion and deliberation with the board. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Buck, and thank you, Mr. Blume, for your presentation. As you mentioned, the action today has little, if anything, to do with the safety project itself, which has had a number of open houses, one in the very recent past, and has been discussed at the Northeast Neighbors. Ms. Wolseley, I would love to talk to you in person about the discussion that's been going on there. The Lane County staff has been working with city staff, but Becky Taylor and Rachel Surslev, who's on the line with us today, have done stellar work in making sure that people's concerns have been met. And I'm certain that as your concerns come up, we'll find ways to answer your questions as thoroughly as you need to have them answered. Significantly, I'll talk ever so briefly about the safety project. It's not, we're in an area here that is what has been described as an urban transition, where any upgrades need to be to city standards, but the county doesn't have the funds nor the capability of upgrading to city standards typically. So the west side of Gillum Road is going to have a sidewalk. The east side is not going to have a sidewalk. The neighbors are fairly satisfied with that because it does give the kids, the many, many kids who walk to school at Gillum Elementary, they will not have to walk along a ditch side anymore. They'll be able to walk along the sidewalk. It still doesn't fully address the concerns, but that's not a matter for a discussion today. That is as we move down the road with the safety project. Once again, a call out to Lane County Public Works staff for the extensive work and the deep neighborhood contact that they've been involved in for probably greater than 4 years now on this project. Thank you, Chair.
Any other discussions, comments, questions? If I don't hear any, then I will close the public hearing. And at this point, is there a motion on the floor? And this would, I think, is a recommendation to approve the order as written.
Chair Buck?
Yes.
I'd like to make such motion. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Commissioner Farr to approve Order 20-10-20-07 as written, second by Commissioner Sorensen. Any discussion? Not seeing any. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
What was that?
I was thanking the board for your time today.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Mr. Blume. Appreciate it. We'll move on to item 11B, which is our third reading and ordinance number PA 1380 in the matter of the Eugene Springfield Metropolitan Area General Plan to adopt amendments to the Eugene Airport Master Plan and adopting savings and severability clauses. And with this is Lindsay Eichner, interim principal planner, and it looks like Dan Halverson, senior planner from the city of Eugene.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. So today, like you just said, is the third reading for Ordinance 1380 for the co-adoption of the Eugene Airport Master Plan. Just to take you back a little bit, September 16th, we had a joint public hearing. And some questions were raised at the public hearing, and airport staff were kind enough to provide a response to some of those questions, which has been attached to your memo. And I also wanted to let you know that last Monday on October 12th, the City Council held their deliberations, and they passed their ordinance in support, which will mirror the ordinance that's before you today. And we do have airport staff and city staff on the line if you would like to ask any follow-up questions. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from the board? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Buck. It's just a silly question that I ask whenever this particular area comes up, and that is, does anyone know how far it is from Eugene to Junction City? Well, the sign here in Bethel, I think it says 8 miles. In reality, I've said in the past that a good golfer could hit a golf ball from Eugene to Junction City, because Junction City comes all the way down to Meadowview, and the airport is very close to Meadowview. So we're paying close attention to our urban growth boundary. Junction City, as has been predicted by many people, and with other cities, they will move closer to Eugene if we don't take care of development inside of the metropolitan area that we have existing. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Sorensen?
I just wanted to thank the people involved from the city and the county for the importance of this airport to the Eugene Springfield metropolitan area, and I appreciate the hard work that went into this master plan. And I'm urging the board to approve it today.
Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. Oh, Commissioner Bosevich.
I was going to just move approval of ordinance number PA 1380.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Bozeman, second by Commissioner Farr. Any discussion? I don't see any, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Do we need to do roll call on this as an ordinance?
That's true. I always do that. Let's do roll call. Mr. Mokrzyski, if you're on the line.
Sorry, I usually pick that up, but I forgot. Okay, I'm going to go, I'll go left to right on my screen. Commissioner Bozevich,
Aye.
Commissioner Burney,
Aye.
Commissioner Farr,
Aye.
Commissioner Sorensen,
Aye.
and Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
That's 5 ayes.
All right. Motion passes unanimously twice. Perfect. Okay, we'll move on to item C, which is order 20-10-20-08 in the matter of adopting the Climate Action Plan, Phase 1, Operations Recommendations Report. And with us should be Dan Hurley, Director of Waste Management, or Public Works, I should say, and Mark Nystrom, our Climate Strategist.
So this is Mark. I'm not 100% sure Dan is with us. He had a fire-related meeting in a few minutes, so he might be off prepping for that. Just a heads
Go ahead
up.
if you'd like to get us started.
Okay, I will. Diana, could I have control of the screen? Is that possible?
Yeah, one moment.
Sure. So I'm coming back to you after presenting the plan last month, excuse me. And I made a couple of changes and wanted to share those with you based on recommendations that you all made. So hoping that you can see my screen. The first thing is just a clarification. I showed you this slide and it shows where our emissions come from in the county and was the basis for our plan. There was a question about the supply chain purchasing, whether business travel was included. Just wanted to let everyone know that yes, we were able to separate out business travel. So we do know that that is included in that supply chain purchasing. That's just a clarification. And then everything else is pretty much the same as last time, except for these 2 items. The internal operations goals and target. Number 3, used to read support county staff in reducing commute emissions by 50% by 2050. Based on the feedback that I received from the commissioners, we moved that to 2035. And then number 5, develop a purchasing policy that emphasizes a low carbon equitable purchasing by, it used to say 2025. We were asked to move that forward and I talked to our purchasing people and 2023 seemed like a reasonable time to have that purchasing policy updated. Otherwise, again, the plan demonstrates or it discusses these actions. Again, this table is a little bit difficult to follow along, but it has the action with potential, mitigation potential in metric tons of CO2 in order from cost. So the best savings would be on the left side of your screen. The highest cost would be to the right side of the screen, with a few that further study is needed. And the rest of the plan goes through and spells out how we would take those actions and the next steps in taking those actions. And so that's all I have in terms of the presentation to you, and wanted to make myself available for questions or clarifications.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by the board? I'll just say I appreciate the timeline changes. I think that reflects the feedback I was receiving as well. Okay, Commissioner Bozovich.
Just would like a little clarity on the natural gas offsets, the purchase of carbon credits. Do we know what we're using our local taxpayer dollars to purchase?
So those offsets would be purchased through Northwest Natural. And Northwest Natural, it fully discloses what programs that they're investing in. So yeah, we would know which programs those are.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? Without seeing any, is there a motion to approve Order 20-10-20-08 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Burney, second by Commissioner Sorensen. Any further discussion? All right, not seeing any, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 4-1 with Commissioner Bozovich in the nay. Thank you. We will move on to our next item. So we are on 11D, clarification on approval of the third reading and setting the fourth reading and continued public hearing, ordinance number 20-08, in the matter of amending Lane Code 16.244, the floodplain combining zone rural comprehensive plan, Lane Code 10.271, floodplain combining district for lands within the urban growth boundaries, to modernize terminology and formatting, clarify a review process, and align the code more closely to state law and the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR Title 44, and adopt a savings and severability clause, file number 509-PA20-05047, and Order 20-08-18-13, in the matter of amending Chapter 11 of Lane Manual to remove Section 11.020 Flood Hazard Studies. And with us is Rachel Surslip, our Associate Planner.
Thank you, Chair Buck, and good afternoon, Commissioners. This is Rachel Surslip, Staff Planner for the Floodplain Code Update Project. And I am here before you today because staff wanted to clarify with the board the motion that was made on October 6th at the third reading and public hearing for this project. To summarize that motion, the board motioned for staff to provide more information on the community rating system and possible savings associated with Lane County having a higher classification in the program. The board also motioned not to prohibit replacement dwellings in the floodway and floodplain, and to prohibit new dwellings in the floodway, but to allow other development in the floodway. That was the motion in response to the actual code changes that were going to be made. But also the motion included moving to a fourth reading and continued public hearing scheduled for November 10th, 2020. And while setting the fourth reading implies that the third reading was approved, it was not expressly part of the motion. Therefore, staff is here today to get clarification on that motion and specifically to ensure that the third reading was actually approved so that we can hold the fourth reading on November 10th. And Chair Buck, I have sent you a draft motion for approving that third reading. But that's all I have in terms of presentation. I'm happy to answer questions on this topic.
Thank you very much. I saw Commissioner Sorensen's hand up.
Did you, or could you just read the motion that you sent to Commissioner Buck?
Yes, I certainly can.
Could you do it now?
Yes, the motion that I sent her was to move to approve the third reading of ordinance number 20-08 and set the fourth reading and continue the public hearing to November 10th, 2020. at 1:30 p.m. date and time certain.
Okay, I would like to make that motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Sorensen, seconded by Commissioner Burney. I'm looking for discussion. Commissioner Bozovich? We need your audio.
My apologies. I wish that Commissioner Sorensen had waited for me to speak before making that motion, because I believe that motion's not the correct motion to be making at this time. We should be moving to reconsider the previous motion and then making the motion clear and accurate. I'm going to read verbatim what was part of last week's motion that we approved. It was not what Ms. Thurslev did as a summary. And it was a three-part motion, and it was a request by the chair to Commissioner Sorensen to restate his motion succinctly. He spent quite a bit of time in the first part directing staff around the cost reductions in flood insurance and getting a study and a report back on that. So that part was about a report back. The second part was the action part of the motion. And this is verbatim what he said. Do not prohibit replacing dwellings in the floodway, a floodplain. Was not an and, it was an it was a stutter, so I'm not sure if he meant floodway or floodplain. Do not stop the replacement of those dwellings, but to have no dwellings but development in the floodway, reversing the prior motion. I don't know how you get what Ms. Thurslev read from that motion. It was not clear. And the third thing he got to is that he was setting a fourth reading. You skipped about approving the third reading and leaving the record open. It didn't even mention a continued public hearing. But the second part of that motion was so unclear. And it is so critically important that we give staff clear direction, because we are writing law. An ordinance is to amend our code. And not only in this case, we're also writing land use law. So there should be a clear record of what we directed staff to do for the next reading. And that is not a clear motion. I was surprised that the chair accepted it as a motion. I was surprised it got a second. I was surprised it passed. But what's really important is to be clear, because there were claims afterwards that we accepted the amendment that had been proposed, and that amendment wasn't even mentioned in the motion around prohibition in the floodplain and fire victims and being able to rebuild. So if that was the intent of the motion, we really should be going through a motion to reconsider and a clear restatement of the motion. And I'll remind folks, we should also be providing direction to staff around findings, because we're talking about a land use law. And if we're going to exempt fire victims, we need to have a clear direction about how we're going to have findings about that, because this has a savings and severability clause. And Commissioner Sorensen knows what that means. I'll remind the rest of the board. It means that if on appeal of this land use law we're passing, if one part of it's found to be illegal, the rest of it still applies. So if our provisions around exempting fire victims are not solid and it gets appealed and thrown out, the fire victims will have to meet the new code, because the rest of the code will still apply. This is a very serious thing. It was one of the reasons why I wrote the memo back to legal counsel and planning saying the motion was not clear. So I would request maybe that we think about a motion to reconsider and a clear motion on passing the third reading and moving to a fourth reading with clear direction to staff, because I will go back and play you that audio. And I sent the audio, the timestamp to staff so they could replay it. If you think that was a clear motion, I don't know how you get that. I mean, there was an unclear between floodway and floodplain, reversing the prior motion. What prior was that? Does that mean not approving the second reading? Because the prior motion was about approving the second reading and giving direction to staff on the third reading. So, and I don't know how you reverse the prior motion that many meetings afterwards. So we're in the next meeting. This is the only meeting we can do a motion to reconsider. And it has to be somebody that voted yes. So
I believe that Andy Clark is on the line if he wants to respond.
I'll try. I am online. Yes. There are really two parts to me to the motion that occurred last time. One was essentially approving the third reading and setting the fourth reading and the public hearing. As I've told folks, I think the motion didn't actually state that the third reading was approved, but it's really implied by the fact that you've set a fourth reading. I think what Ms. Surslev read today to confirm essentially that the third reading was approved, if the board approves that motion today, I think that takes care of any ambiguity with respect to the process. That is, whether we've done the readings in the right way and set the additional readings and hearing. So that's all that needs to happen, I think, to make sure that we're online to adopt this ordinance and these code changes whenever the board gets to a point where it's comfortable with the language. The rest of the motion or motions that were made by Commissioner Sorensen that Commissioner Bozovich has indicated were ambiguous have to do with the direction given to staff as to what you, the board, want to see as far as code draft. If what Ms. Surslev read today on that piece is acceptable to the board, I think it's fine to approve that motion, giving staff sufficient direction as to what you want to see. If there are any changes being made, and I don't recommend that you make any changes to what staff understood the direction to be in terms of what language to come back with on the ordinance. We really only want to do that at the official readings. This is not an official reading. This is just clarification of what went on last time, okay? If there are details to be worked out, well, and let me just say this. If staff is comfortable with the direction they receive from the board on what the language, if any amendments are to be made, they'll come back in the fourth reading, and the board at that time can consider the language in front of you and decide whether you want to propose any amendments to what's there. You can also talk about what findings you suggest that staff ought to make in connection with the ordinance adoption. So I don't think that anything more than that needs to be done at this point. As I say, I think the important part for me really is to make sure we're still on track with the ordinance process. That is the third reading, the fourth reading, and however many readings there are supposed to be. And if staff is comfortable with the direction from the board as to what language they're coming back with for the fourth reading.
Thank you. I'll go to Commissioner Sorensen and then go back to Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you very much. I agree with Mr. Clark that we just need to provide the clarification that the third reading has occurred. And I also agree with him that we are doing this out of an abundance of caution to indicate that we did have the third reading. I also agreed with him that it could fairly easily be implied that by the board setting a fourth reading, it did in fact have a third reading. Whether or not the motion states that or not, I don't think is entirely necessary, but I think this is a good thing to clarify. In terms of the substance, I also agree that we should not be discussing the substance of it because of two things. One, we should be looking at what the staff brings us for the fourth reading and debating and discussing that. And the other thing we should do is be mindful that people in the community have raised the issue of the relationship between the assistance Lane County is trying to give the residents of the McKenzie Valley in particular, and whether or not that has anything to do with the ordinance at issue. And we want to make sure that we have a full discussion on the 4th of the efforts that the county is making to help those residents. I didn't interject the relationship between the fire and the assistance the county is making to residents of the victims of the fire, but that has been done, and we all agree, I believe, to have that work session on the 4th. So we have several opportunities, and the fact is, this is a complicated topic. The board in other difficult land use ordinance cases has gone up to 22 readings. So we're just getting started, in my view, of how to properly enact this ordinance. And if we need to have 15 more readings, then that's what we need. But if we can get it done in 7 readings or 6 readings, great. But I don't think we're going to finish it at 4 readings. And so we might as well keep moving the process along and keep accepting and making sure the record's open and keeping accepting ideas on the various drafts that staff comes up with. So I hope the board does approve this motion. Thank you.
Commissioner Postovich?
Thank you. My major concern isn't about the 3rd reading, and that clarification is a fairly easy thing to do. My concern is the only thing that directs staff to prepare the next reading is what the motion that a majority of the board, while a quorum was present, voted on and approved. That motion was unclear. And the only way to get it clear is either for work being done outside of a public meeting between other board members and staff to clarify what the motion really meant, which is working outside of a public meeting, or for us to clarify it as a board. And I would ask any of you to go back and listen to how that motion was made and think that it gave clear, accurate direction to staff on how to prepare the next reading. It did not. I think staff's going by what they're hearing from the board in other venues about how to prepare the next reading or in other discussions. But the only thing that matters was how was that motion actually stated? How did that motion actually provide direction? Because that was what a majority of the board passed. Do not prohibit replacement dwellings in the floodplain, do not prohibit replacement dwellings in the floodway of floodplain. Do not stop the replacement of those dwellings, but to have no dwellings but development in the floodway, reversing the prior motion. That was the action statement of that motion. And I don't get what Ms. Serslev read from that action statement. And we can kind of ignore that as a board and say, you know what? We're okay with things happening outside of public meetings. We're okay with preparing law without correct directions. But, in my previous 8 years on the board, whenever we asked for a change in a reading for the next reading, it was very clear, even down to the wording sometimes of what we wanted changed to come back. Not generalized directions or stumbled over directions, including, statements like reversing the prior motion, which I'm not sure what kind of direction that is to staff to rewrite, ordinance law. Remember, we're talking about ordinances that are going to apply to those folks upriver, and we need to be careful, clear, and accurate with this. And I don't think that motion was clear about exempting the fire victims and clear in a way that's going to be an unappealable method of exempting them. So I've said my piece. If the board majority wants to move on with this without providing that clear direction, that's the record they're leaving behind to be challenged in court.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Buck. You know, anybody watching this must be as confused as we probably are here at the Board of County Commissioners. You know, when we started work on this ordinance, it was before the Mackenzie River fire, before the Holiday Farm fire. The Holiday Farm fire pointed out some flaws in the ordinance that needed to be recrafted, that pointed out that the ordinance needed to be recrafted. We're attempting to do it during deliberations in a Board of County regular board meeting. That is not the best place to make the kind of corrections to this ordinance that need to be made. I stated it last time, I'll state it again. I believe, and I would recommend that the board take a step back from this ordinance, send it back to the Planning Commission so that they can rewrite it, so we don't have to have Commissioner Sorensen's 22 or 6 or 7 readings in order to craft it on the fly to make it somewhat close to maybe perfect. I think the Planning Commission is charged to do such, charged to deliberate in depth in ways that we cannot do at the Board of County Commissioners meetings. And I would recommend that we send it back to the Planning Commission for rework.
Commissioner Burney.
I'd like to acknowledge a couple of things before I say anything. One is I want to acknowledge that both Commissioners Farr and Bozovich have identified different, they haven't said the same thing, but they've been very consistent through these discussions with the points they've made. I also want to acknowledge that the vast majority, if not all, of the fire victims are in Chair Buck's district. So as we discuss this, I know it hits home for you, Chair. I don't have the background and expert. This is not in my natural wheelhouse. Earlier this morning was, and I loved to talk about that, and I thank you for that. But this is not. It seems to me, and I'm ready for someone to explain I'm wrong, that no one would be against what Commissioner Bozovich stated in terms of clarity, and that all of them, I'm ready for you to tell me I'm wrong, but I've heard nobody, no commissioner, say that their intention is anything other than to exempt victims of the fire in both the floodway and the floodplain from rebuilding as quickly as they, as quickly as practical and safe and possible. And obviously, Commissioner Bozovich even mentioned that probably all of us are going to go above and beyond and try and help with that. What I don't understand at this point, and actually I would defer to Commissioner Bozovich or to Andy, but what I don't understand at this point is what the problem would be in approving this motion to get the process on track and then discussing the substantive details after staff works and here's what we're saying, and tries to make this exceedingly clear and responsive to the whole savings and severability point that Commissioner Bozovich made. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't see why we can't move forward together, even if it takes a number of readings. And having said that, if Commissioner Farr, if the 4th and 5th reading are as lack of clear, not as clearer and providing much more specific directions than this, then I'll end up agreeing with you on that point. But I'm not quite there yet. And I just wanted to make that statement. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Sorensen.
I'll just mention that part of the reason that in a complicated land use ordinance that you make a motion to have staff consider remarks commissioners make and come back with language is precisely to avoid having the commissioners legislate on the fly and have the public be given the opportunity to review what staff writes up. And it is very common that commissioners in making motions, seconding motions, saying they're going to vote for those motions and why they're voting for them and why they're voting against them, that staff listen to all that and listens to that commentary and drafts language that they believe is in keeping with the with the motion that directed them to come back with new language or additional language. In terms of this being some sort of process outside of the board meetings, I can say that I've had no discussions with any commissioners on this topic and rarely on any other topic. And so, at least for me, I don't see how me making motions to direct staff and having the board approve those motions really is anything other than giving everyone, myself included, an opportunity to look over what staff writes up. And if they're in a complicated land use, decision, changing an ordinance, that there is a lot of complexity and not every commissioner understands all the complexity, myself included, then staff will come back and draft it. And the public, in my view, should have every opportunity to review it, comment on it, and testify about it. And in my view, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that the residents of the McKenzie Valley, as well as any other valley in the county, are properly protected, and that the work that we do helps them understand what the policies of the county are. And like I said, I think having this thing moved out after our work session about the fire and the aftermath of the fire will further inform the board. I don't take any pride of authorship here at all on this motion. And if this goes into January and February when I'm not on the board, that's fine with me too. But I just think that we ought to observe this process and each give our own views in the public meetings about what we like or dislike about the process. And right now I feel like having a motion to direct staff, which is what I made, protects everyone's rights to understand, well, what did staff do in response to that? Did they implement it? Did they have trouble implementing it? It wasn't that clear to some people. So what are we supposed to do? Well, they're supposed to write up the language the best they can. Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
Thanks, Chair Buck. And the discussion that we're having really illustrates that we have a relatively complex ordinance here that was affected by an act of God that there is no way that we could have predicted. We are changing the ordinance based upon what happened through the tragic fire in the McKenzie Valley. Now, we do today have the information from that fire to help us potentially take a look down the road at what other flaws that this ordinance may have. If we pass the ordinance prior to the fire, then the victims of the fire would be, in fact, in danger of not being able to return to their property. So that gives me reason to once again state that we as a Board of Commissioners, as talented as we are, and as all-knowing and all-grasping as we are, there's no way we can grasp all of this as we discuss it in a board meeting. It needs to be discussed in a meeting where there's a freer back and forth, where a planning commission, which is charged to really dig deeply into it and not just read it in the 2 weeks prior to the discussion that we're having at the board, but really study it in depth. Consequently, I will restate my urging that we send this back to the planning commission for more deliberation, to retool the ordinance, rewrite it, and bring it back for a first reading of the new ordinance.
Commissioner Bozevich.
Thank you. I just want to address something that Commissioner Sorensen said. If his motion had included anything close to, I'd like staff to take into account our previous discussion on this and wrap that into the next reading, I'd be fine. The problem was his motion never said for staff to go back and look at what we had discussed with, not as individual commissioners expressing opinions, not as a motion voted on by a majority of the board. His motion specifically stated some information that was gave mixed messages at best, and did not have that context of, oh, and include what we were discussing. That's part of my point, is the motion was not clear. And what staff is if they take into account our individual statements prior to the words, I'd like to make a motion, and your request to have that motion clarified, Chair, that's all individual opinion. It wasn't until we actually had a motion that we voted on as a quorum that we're actually giving direction to staff to rewrite. And I don't think that direction was clear. That's what I'm trying to point out. If the majority of the board wants to move ahead and straighten out at least the third reading portion, which was just a minor piece of how unclear the motion was, that's fine. I'll probably vote against the motion again, just because I think the motion was unclear at this point. And we'll move on from there. But I wanted to try and point out and hopefully maybe give clear direction from a majority of the board, so it's very clear to everybody what our intent was. But I don't know how you get from what I've read twice now, and I could play the actual recording. I've gone back and listened to it 10 or 12 times to get that verbatim transcription written. It's not clear. It doesn't talk about including anything from previous discussions. It doesn't direct staff to take into account some of that. If that was the intent, then that should have been what the motion said. That's what I'm trying to get to. And basically, if staff is making changes based on what individual commissioners said prior to the motion, I don't know if that's good process either. Right? We are a board writing law. We direct staff, and we have to provide clear direction. And if the intent was to follow the general discussion prior to the motion, that should have been stated in the motion.
I'll just add a few words here. And so I think we're nearing to the end. I just want to remind folks that we're not setting precedent by altering something that was provided to the board from the Planning Commission. And if it eventually gets approved, that happens. This has happened in the past. It will probably happen in the future. So I understand the points that are being made. In my opinion, I don't think we need to go back and rehash the entire process all over again. That's my humble opinion. What Rachel mentioned initially sounded like what I heard too, but I understand the points that are being made. The motion on the floor currently that we're under discussion is specifically approving the third reading of the ordinance and setting the fourth one for November 10th. I think that is pretty clear for us to be able to move forward on. We've had several rounds of talking. I feel like we're at the point where we're beating a dead horse. But yeah, I'll ask once again if there's anybody else that wants to say anything further. Commissioner Burney.
Sorry, Chair, I know you did, but I've only done one round. You have two. I'm going to quote lyrics of a Harry Belafonte song. It's as clear as mud and it covered the ground. I am going to vote to approve the third reading, but I'm also going to state that I think everything Commissioner Bozovich identified for clarity, given that we all want to and will exempt people who suffered damages of buildings and property in the fires, will be exempt. Without that clarity at the fourth reading, I'm not going to predict which way I go, but on this one, to move the process forward and to then seek the clarity that I think all of us want, I am going to support this. Thank you.
Any final comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. And to be clear, the motion on the floor is to move to approve the third reading of the ordinance number 20-08 and set the fourth reading and continue the public hearing to November 10th, 2020 at a 1:30 p.m. date and time certain. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 3-2 with Commissioner Farr and Commissioner Bozievich in the nay. We'll move on to item 12 on our agenda, which is commissioner announcements. Are there any announcements? All right, no announcements for today. Are there any future board assignment requests? We still have plenty on our plate. All right, no future board assignment requests. We're on to item 13, which is review of assignments.
I don't have any, so you've made my job on reporting on or reviewing assignments easy unless I missed anything.
That is what I heard as well.
Okay.
All right, there's no executive session today. Any other business for this afternoon? All right. I don't
Chair
see
Buck,
any.
I'd like to state I will probably be on audio only for this evening's meeting. I'm going to be, I'll be in full attendance at the public meeting tonight. I also have a Community Health Council meeting, which I will cease when this meeting begins, when this evening's meeting begins.
Very good. So with that, we are in recess until 5:30 for our evening public comment. Thank you, everybody.